Hey folks, welcome to another lesson. This lesson is going to be devoted to helping you make a more meaningful decision about what weapon you want to start with. Again, you can't go wrong with any weapon, but I realize that some of you kind of want a little bit more of a breakdown about what to pick. So let's start with the sword. The sword, in my opinion, is a very good all-purpose weapon. It can handle literally any scenario without too much trouble, but in order to really do so, you need to use all the various tools that you might think are otherwise not that useful. And so it can be really tricky to understand, and as a result many players might miss out on just how effective of a weapon this is. It's got everything you need, all sorts of really cool stylish options that I think make this weapon a joy to work with. It also has some of the flashiest hidden skills in my opinion, and yes, in this game there are hidden skills. Bosses do drop skills, and I will cover that a bit later. Here's probably, in my opinion, let me give you some standout abilities that include some hidden skills. For example, there's EI Quick Draw. I think Night Rain's really cool too. And then of course, there's literally this ability called Severing Spin, which looks anime as hell, and it is so good for it. And so I think you'll have a blast playing the sword, especially once you learn how to work with it. Let's move on to dual swords next. Dual swords is also good in terms of being an all-purpose weapon. It can handle many different scenarios too, but it lacks, in my opinion, quite a bit of variety, but it's still really cool. What it does lack in general combat variety offensively, I think it's really good in the defensive department. It actually has 6 different parries, which I know the Nioh community at large kind of pokes fun at, but it has 6 different types of parries that work against various different enemies, work in various different situations, so it can be really effective, and it can be really stylish on that front. So it's definitely worth checking out, investigating if that appeals to you. In my opinion, it is a very safe weapon to start with, and that's what I would say about that. Some general abilities in your rotation that you might use include God of Wind. Let me show you what that looks like. So there's that. Many players also use Sign of the Cross. Many players like to use Windstorm, another ability which I'm not using at this present time. Many players like the ability Water Sword too, and you can just kind of keep a target in place and just spam that over and over again. So those are definitely some pretty cool abilities that you can work with. Next up is going to be the spear. Spear is kind of a technical weapon. It sports a lot of range, as you can kind of see there. Pretty nice. It's really good at manipulating humans, opponents, especially with abilities such as, and let me bring them out. I got a few. Okay. So you've got abilities like this, which can parry human opponents. You've also got abilities like Body Swap, which can control opponents as well. And so if they're blocking, well, hey, guess what? They're going to get knocked down. Speaking of knocking them down, you can do that on demand. If you want to parry, you can parry as well. So it's really quite effective at dealing with human opponents. It's still pretty good at dealing with yokai as well. I mean, this is an ability that'll work against humans pretty nicely. But there's a lot of power to it, but it can be very difficult to understand. But again, you've got a lot of range, and you can do some really fun, stylish things like this, which certainly are a lot of fun. And eventually, as you spend a little bit of time, you'll really learn how to get the most bang out of your buck for it. Alright, let's move on to the axe. With the axe, you've got, it's ultimately really slow compared to most of the other weapons, but what it lacks in speed, it easily makes up for in power. And I will say it hits like a truck, and some of the abilities are just so hilarious to use. So for example, I particularly like Lumber Chop because you can basically home run opponents away. It's just so satisfying to throw out. Another ability that I think works really well for it, let me see if I can showcase this. So Rampage, I think arguably does like the most key damage in the game, and yeah, it's pretty wild. There's other abilities like Mat Spinner, which many players like, because you can just Well, that didn't look as cool as Mad Spinner 2. Let me showcase that. So, Mad Spinner 2, where are you at? Alright, here you go. So you can just speed really, really fast, and I've seen many builds that just revolve around this one skill, if that interests you. So you can work with that. Another one of the newer abilities that was released was Spinning Slide. So you can sidestep your opponent and then quick charge, a really powerful ability. What else? Yeah, this is a new standout ability, in my opinion, Tidebreaker. A lot of power to it. And that's what Axe is really good at doing, just completely obliterating enemies with strong, powerful attacks. And don't let the fact that it's slower disincentivize you from trying it. It's really, really effective, and I have a lot of fun with it personally. Especially with abilities like Lumber Chop and abilities like Cloud Crush, where you can just throw enemies away, and you can throw enemies off cliffs, and I love it. And I absolutely love it. It's a really good weapon. And believe it or not, I've seen Axe used to speedrun Nioh 2. So if speedrunners can use it, so you can too. Okay, let's move on to another weapon, Kusarigama. So with the Kusarigama is a very technical weapon, and it also has lots of long animations. However, what it lacks in animation speed, it has great technicality to it. It's very effective in controlling the spacing of fights. You can, jump over opponents, you can leap on them, you can hit them from really far away. It's just an overall very effective weapon, and it is not to be underestimated whatsoever. One of the favorite abilities I see for many players for the Kusarigama, especially if they want to just get a quick damage boost, is Reaper. Reaper is a very simple ability to use, and as you can see, you can just wail on an enemy mercilessly. So many players like using this. I like all sorts of other abilities. I think abilities like Blade Spin are really fast and really effective. One of the hidden skills that, again, I'll talk about a bit later, that I think is really cool is Water Drop. And it's a lot of fun. It's a fun weapon. It's a very stylish weapon to use. And it's pretty good for most scenarios, but it's just tricky to understand how to work with it. But I would advise you give this a chance. I see many ninja players who like using dex builds using the Kusarigama. I personally don't care about the dex build part. I still think this weapon is really fun and really stylish to use, and it's a joy to work with. But yeah, it's a super unique weapon. All right, next up is the Odachi. The Odachi is a weapon that is really effective at pressuring human opponents. Any enemy that tries to block against this is gonna kind of get murdered. There's many abilities that deal with human opponents very, very effectively, and so it behooves you to kind of learn. And it also has a stance switching mechanic built in, so you can transition between many different stances and get benefits for doing so. And so you can be quite effective with it. But it's a little tricky to understand how to work with it, because at first glance it seems just like a slower sword, but I think it's really effective. Some standout abilities, in my opinion, include the following. Moonlit Snow Redux is an ability that showcases how crazily fast this weapon can be now, which I think is super cool. It's weaker than, I guess, its cousin, Moonlit Snow, which it's just such a ton of power and heft built into it. Moonlit Snow is really, really, really powerful. But I like Moonlit Snow Redux because it's so fast. But you can use both. Other abilities that I think are really good include Bolting Boar. Bolting Boar is one of the few abilities in the game that can not only parry humans, but also can parry many yokai. Yes, you can parry yokai with melee weapons. It's not just limited to burst counters. So Bolting Boar is really good for that. Other abilities that I think are really cool that stand out include Twin Moons, really effective. One of the newer abilities, Thunderbolt, is good, particularly if you're a character that can withstand a bunch of punishment. Basically, humans are attacking you while you ready this attack, you can punish them back pretty mercilessly. It's pretty cool. I like the Odachi quite a lot. Next is Tonfa. Tonfa is a bit of an atypical weapon in that Tonfa's main appeal is less to do with its damage and more to do with its ability to really pressure opponents quite effectively. And you can also turn your defense into an offense via the Mystic Art, which you won't get for some time, but Kanagi. You can cancel out of Tonfa techniques using what's referred to as Demon Dance, which is what the whole weapon kind of has based on. Demon Dance is so essential to how Tonfa plays, and it's pretty wild, and there's all sorts of interesting things that you can do from it. To kind of illustrate the ability to cancel techniques and go from there, I'm going to show you something you can do. This is actually a dodge that you can do really, really quickly. So you're dodging in place and you can cancel out techniques. So you can cancel that, cancel that. See how that's a long animation? I can cancel that at will. And then I can like cancel all sorts of things. It's a lot of fun. So I would recommend you try it. Also, there's something referred to as Tonfa Gun. And on 2 abilities of the Tonfa, you can explode targets. It's pretty wild. Definitely a lot of fun. But again, its biggest strength is its ability to pressure opponents and turn defense into offense. So you're going to go for sustained damage over burst damage. Next up is going to be the Hatchets. Hatchets are a supremely technical weapon, and they're very unique in that you can throw your hatchets from afar. And you can also, you kind of embrace a hit and run sort of play style. Abilities like this one kind of really show, in my opinion, just how flexible it can be, but it's just weird because you're just like far away and you're like, hey, I'm gonna throw a hatchet. And then what? Do I like walk up to my enemy? No, you don't have to. Again, far away, and then you can engage real quick. You can back out real quick. You can throw your hatchets real quick. You can trap an enemy in place and then move around. Like, there's just a lot of technicality with it. Some standout abilities, in my opinion, include this. You can throw your hatchets everywhere. You can dodge while you throw. You do that. You need to pack a quick punch. You can do that as well. You can throw a hatchet in the air and then just like leave, and then it'll come back down. You can use that to hit targets that are above you. There's a lot of different situations that the hatchets work really well, but it's also very tricky to understand. So bear that in mind. I like it a lot, but it's difficult to work with. Next up is Switchglaive. Switchglaive is it's kind of a weapon that is jack of all trades, master of none. It has a stance switching mechanic very similar to the Odachi, but this weapon very, very heavily relies upon that. If you don't use the stance switching mechanic to like combo in between stances and stuff, you're going to struggle with this weapon. It's also very difficult to understand when to stop switching your stances to do really cool things. It also has, in my opinion, some of the most stylish abilities present in this game. Some of them include abilities like Arc of Chaos, where you can literally throw your Switchglaive. I'm a big fan of Divine Retribution, so you can hop over opponents. Many other players like the ability that it competes with, which is Empty Retribution, which does a lot of pressure. There's also really cool stuff like Fleeting Edge, which allows you to move around targets, and so I personally like it a lot. There's also abilities like Kibosh Kicker, which are really good against human opponents. Again, there's a lot of different tools that it has, but the main appeal is the fact that you can switch your stances just on the fly, and so you can transition into stances without too much trouble. So it's very similar to the Odachi in that respect, but unlike the Odachi, the Switchglaive is heavily dependent upon this. With the Odachi, you don't have to do it, but with Switchglaive, you kind of have to get a lot of power out of it. So you just need to be wary of that when you pick up this weapon. But it's a lot of fun for many, many players. So I would recommend it. Some standout abilities, in my opinion, include... I know I just talked about some, but one that I know is very, very popular with many players is Cyclone. As you can see, it's super fast, and then it can punish opponents relentlessly. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. Definitely worth checking out. It also has... there's just a lot of flexibility with the weapon. You're just going to be doing all sorts of cool stuff if you can tap into it. So let's move on to the next weapon, Next weapon I have already equipped, so I'll just equip the last one anyway. The next weapon is the Splitstaff, one of my personal favorite weapons. It's pretty difficult to understand how to get the most bang out of its buck. It's a weapon that revolves around one major mechanic, which is referred to as fluid form. Hold the button down used when attacking to alter the Splitstaff form, changing the nature of your attack. So what exactly are we changing about the attack? Well, certain attacks will get... So these are mystic arts, which you won't get for some time, but attacks that have their range extended can blah, blah, blah. So you can extend the range of attacks, or you can grant certain attacks will have additional hits. So let me just showcase this, for example. So I'm going to do a certain skill. Looks pretty standard, but if I hold down, you can see I did like additional hits there. Some attacks will get additional hits, or some will get additional range. So it's absolutely intended. It's very flexible. It's a very flexible weapon and can handle many, many different situations, but there are many risks to it. And being able to understand how to work with this weapon can be very tricky for some, especially since there is so much flexibility to keep in mind. But I really like it. It certainly fits the whole monk archetype that I'm sure many players would like to have, but it's very tricky for players to understand and to play this weapon quite stylishly, because you're going to commit to many, many long animations, and it can just feel at times very bad to do so. But if you get a good understanding of it, then you can kind of mess around with it very effectively. So I would recommend that you give this a fair chance. But if you don't decide to use most of the toolkit, but you still think the weapon is appealing to you, then I can show you some skills that many players will kind of rely upon. So Shin Crusher and Shin Crusher 2, it's kind of the bread and butter ability for Splitstaff for good all key damage purposes. Shin Crusher 1 alone deals heavy key damage, really good, and so Shin Crusher 2 takes that up. Many players like to use the ability Dragon Dance. It's very similar to abilities like the Water Sword. So it can be very powerful to just kind of mess around with this and just keep a target in place. And then there's even a damage boost for basically depleting all of your ki. But yeah, I like it a lot, and hopefully you guys give it a chance. Cool parries like this. I mean, there's just a lot of like fun different things you can do, and you can adapt the weapon to various situations. So it's definitely a blast. One of my favorites for sure. Last but not least is certainly the fists, or in my case, I'm using clawed fists. And the main appeal of this weapon is the Naruto run. No, I'm just kidding. The main appeal of the fists revolves around one major mechanic, which is as follows. It's a bunch. There's a bunch of text here, but more or less what's going on is that you are chaining different skills together, and if you do so successively, you will get a huge attack boost. And that's pretty wild, because you can get a ton of damage from this. It's really, many players find that it's really effective against human opponents, and there's abilities which are absolutely ridiculous, like this, which I'm not pulling off the timing for because I'm great. Yeah, what a great demonstration. Okay, thank you for that. Let me show you what it actually looks like though, if I could multitask. But there's abilities like Beyond Infinity, which are just, they look so cool, and I'm sure you'll be able to eventually learn how to pull it off, and it feels great being able to pull this off. But it's a very close range weapon, which is not a surprise. But one of the weaknesses of this weapon is that it can be very difficult to manage its ki, because if you just chain all these crazy abilities together, it can just be quite difficult to manage your ki levels when you're just basically trying to play this game like any other fighting game, where you combo a bunch of different things together. But it's a pretty fun weapon to use, to say the least, and you have a lot of different options when it comes to messing with opponents. In my opinion, it can be tricky to work against yokai enemy unless you're very familiar with the moveset and know what you're doing with the fists. But it does things that many other weapons cannot, and it is so satisfying. Let me show you some of the parries, for example, that it has available that won't necessarily get used. But yeah, look at this. It's definitely doesn't feel like it belongs in a Nioh game, but it's so cool. Again, I already showed Beyond Infinity, but there's this ability, Limitless. So again, really cool stuff. But yeah, you've got like many different options, and if many players who play the fists thoroughly enjoy them, because there's just like so much you can do with it. I'm sure you'll enjoy messing around with it too. If you're a Ninja Gaiden fan, I know abilities like Tiger Claws are really cool. So having that, it also happens to have the Azuna drop, which is really cool too. So yeah, it's definitely a weapon that I'm sure many of you will enjoy. So there you go, check that out, see what you think. Let's see if I can do the Beyond Infinity timing. All right, I gotta be quiet because I can't multitask. Okay, let's see if I can do it. Nope. Nope, no way, I gotta do it. What? Can I not do it? So much for all my experience. Okay. For real this time. Really? Okay. I was close, but I suck. Okay. But yeah, so hopefully that kind of helps inform you as to the various weapons. I apologize for the length of this video, but hopefully it was instructive enough. I'll follow up this video with stuff pertaining to the hidden skills, which I know I talked about, and hopefully that'll help you make a better decision as to what to expect in this game. Thank you guys for watching. Hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.